Hello and welcome. My name is Jill, and for my presentation, we will be looking at the quality analysis of the 2020 edX course, Learning Design and Technology, Learning Theories, by the University of Maryland Global Campus, also known as LDT 100X. Let's take a quick look at the course being evaluated. Learning Design and Technology, Learning Theories was an 8-week course developed by the University of Maryland Global Campus. The course was hosted on the edX platform and ended in January of 2020. This course is the first in a series of 4. Students who complete all 4 courses and pay for certification can earn edX's MicroMaster's certificate in Learning Design and Technology. For students who wish to continue on with their studies, this certificate can be used as credit toward their Master's in Learning Design and Technology at UMGC. It is important to note the learning objectives of this course because they guide the learning design process and are what all activities and content are weighted against. You can see them outlined here. As the first course in the series, LDT 100X is a foundational course and intended for students who do not have prior knowledge in the subject. The objectives for this case study are, first, to evaluate the overall quality of the course's design based on an industry standard tool of evaluation. For this, we use the Online Learning Consortium QCTIP scorecard. To assess the effectiveness of the course design in meeting the outlined learning objectives. And finally, to offer recommendations for future iterations of the course. It is important to point out that for the purpose of this study, I was only given access to the archived learner interface. This limited my evaluation to the course content and discussion boards. I was not provided information on completion rates, student-instructor interactions, or final project results. As you will see later in the study, this severely limited the ability to evaluate several categories of the QCTIP scorecard. Iterative evaluation is a central part of the learning design process. This process becomes even more important in asynchronous online courses due to the dependence on course design as a tool of communicating with students. This study evaluated the student-facing interface of LDT 100X with a focus on content and the embedded discussion boards. The following 3-step process was used. First, the OLC quality scorecard, referred to as QTIP, was used to take a detailed assessment of the course content. Next, the course's overall visual design was assessed. And finally, an analysis of the strengths and weaknesses were reviewed using the QTIP scorecard as reference. The main evaluation tool for this case study, as mentioned previously, was the QTIP scorecard. According to their website, OLC quality scorecards are used to advance the quality of digital learning. They do this by focusing on 10 areas of online learning design. Each category is divided into subsections, which are scored individually from 0 to 2. A score of 0 means that the criteria is emerging. If an item receives a score of 1, it indicates that the criteria has been accomplished. And a score of 2 is given if the criteria being evaluated is considered exemplary. You can see the first 5 categories listed in the chart here. The numbers below each section represent the maximum score a course can earn in the given category. Here are the other 5 categories of the QTIP scorecard. It is worth noting that the QTIP evaluation categories prove to be a limiting tool when evaluating LDT 100X. The dependence on instructor role, communication, community, and class discussions are high point items, as LDT 100X is a MOOC-style course or a massive open online course. Information about categories like instructor roles are not applicable. While these categories are important focuses when evaluating the quality of online instruction, this course may benefit from an evaluation tool that is focused on the realities of a MOOC-style program. Despite its limitations, the QTIP scorecard did offer some insight into the quality of LDT 100. The chart here displays the score received in each of the Q-TIP's 10 categories and compares it with the maximum scores available. Overall, the course received 103 out of 194 points. As you can see, LDT 100 did not score exceptionally well in most categories. Some of this is due to lack of information. For example, I was unable to assess the course's continuous improvement score because I did not have access to the information being graded. While the overall score for the course was on the low side, there were a few high-performing areas worth noting. The Q-tip score for course design was 18 out of 26 points. The course's learning outcomes received 16 out of 22 points. The course's content was the highest rated category, getting 16 out of 18 points. And the rating for assignments was 11 out of 14. Overall, the high scores in these categories display that care was taken when designing the learning content of this course. We will go over several of these in detail in the strengths and weaknesses section of this presentation, but for now, it is good to get an overview of where the course scored well. For areas of the course that scored the lowest, I looked at scores that received less than half of the points possible. These areas are shown here. Communication, feedback, and community are areas where this course struggled. As previously mentioned, part of this scoring is due to the lack of access to information regarding student-instructor feedback. These are known issues in MOOC-style courses where the average person spends less than 8 minutes on a MOOC page. MOOCs have an unusually high dropout rate too, with over 80% of students leaving after just a few lessons. I have previously mentioned some of the limitations of this study. For the purpose of clarity, I want to reiterate some of the challenges faced when trying to assess LDT 100X. The ability to fully assess the instructor's role was hindered as the study lacked access to any instructor-centered data. Student learning achievement was also missing from this study due to the lack of access to the final portfolio project, which made up 60% of participants' grade. Access to any feedback from student or instructor surveys were also missing. These would have been helpful tools when looking at overall satisfaction with the current course design. Understanding the course's Q-tip scores brought into focus the strengths and weaknesses of LTD 100X. Now, let's take a look at some of these areas in detail. Here, we will highlight several of the course's strengths and review some of its weakest points. As the scorecard showed, LDT 100X's course design and content were areas where the course showed strength. Of particular interest were the overall scaffolding of the course content, the alignment of activities with the stated learning outcomes, and the clarity of expectations. The weakest categories, according to the Q-tip scorecard, were centered on community, communication, and feedback. In addition to these areas, a review of the visual design elements of the course revealed significant issues with the overall visual design. Let's take a look at one of the areas where this course performed particularly well. Throughout the 8 weeks, learners were guided along a well-constructed path of content that guided them from a theoretical foundation to the end goal of developing their own learning approach to design. This is an important consideration in digital learning spaces where content without direct instructional guidance can overwhelm students or create confusion. This phenomenon of cognitive overload is described by the cognitive learning theory. CLT seeks to explain how instruction affects mental capacity and the ability for learners to retain the information they are learning. For the sake of this case study, we will describe it as the capacity of an individual to process information in instruction. Along with thoughtful course pacing, LDT 100X provided learners with a variety of real world activities that aligned with the course's learning outcomes. Here you can see an example of how the weekly competencies inform the discussion and activity. Furthermore, we see how they tie into the bigger picture objectives of the course. In this case, to explore learning theories and their impact on the design of learning experiences. Excuse me. This example also displayed another important strength of this course, that all assignments ask learners to recall what was learned before. They are then asked to build on what they know and apply it to a bigger task. Ironically, this activity displays the theory it is teaching about, constructivism. Constructivism emphasizes the need for adult learners to participate in activities that are based on real world scenarios. One of the cornerstones of a good instructional design online is the development of a community within a course. In the book, in the book, The Disruptive Power of Online Education, social collaboration was viewed as a centerpiece of online learning. There was a noticeable lack of participation from both learners and facilitators in this course. I have noted several times that this study was not given access to enrollment data for this course. Therefore, it is difficult to fully assess the level of student participation throughout the 8-week duration. To get an understanding of the level of participation, I looked at the number of posts in the weekly discussion forums embedded in the course. In week 1, there were 257 discussion posts. By week 3, the level of participation dropped sharply with only 22 posts. And finally, by week 8, there was only 1 post. After counting total post participation, I assessed how many received comments from a peer or facilitator. I counted any post that received at least 1 comment. The chart here clearly shows the diminishing pattern of participation in the course. However, due to the vast difference in scale from the first week to the 8th, you cannot see that from week 5 on, there was a complete lack of engagement on the few posts that were present. For students to build meaning and connection in an online course, there has to be a significant amount of feedback and community engagement. The final assessment of this study focused on the visual elements of the course design. The visual elements of a course design should not be overlooked. Items like font size and type, the use of color, page spacing, and choice of images and multimedia presentations need to be considered as a part of designing effective learning experiences. When used properly, the visual elements of a course design can increase the content's stickiness. Here you can see some helpful design tips from Christopher Pappas, the founder of e-learning industry. These are one example of focal points for good online course design. When reviewing the visual components of this course, there were several areas that needed to be addressed. The first can be observed here. When viewing the course content on a desktop, the font appears smaller than when using a mobile device. In this case, an iPad, as you can see on the left. This created a readability issue in the desktop version and made the content appear crammed together. The course also lacked a visual design strategy. When images were used, they often looked like the first picture. While this image does connect with the topic being discussed, its placement is odd and it does not draw the viewer's attention. The second picture is representative of how most of the course content was displayed. As you can see, there's very little use of imagery, white space, or chunking of content. Additionally, this course did not regularly utilize images as instructional aids. Only once in week 6 was an infographic used to explain the topic of gamification. Another useful visual tool in online learning are videos. While they are utilized in this course, it was not consistent, and their use was mostly for passive content delivery. A more strategic use of these resources would benefit the overall learning experience in this course. Moving forward, it will be important to consider all that has been discussed in the study. Learning design is a continuous process of evaluation and adjustment. For LDT 100X to continue to be an effective learning tool for aspiring learning designers, some changes will need to be made. To resolve the lack of engagement in the course, instructors could design questions that encourage feedback. One way to accomplish this is to include discussions into an assignment. For instance, a student could be asked to expand on several students' experiences and provide analysis of them in an assignment. Another way to encourage engagement is to add incentives to participation. This could be in the form of participation points or other creative ways to reward students for their responses. For community engagement, it will be necessary for instructors to access systems outside the embedded discussion forum. Learners could be directed to community discussion boards, social media sites, and industry conferences as a solution to the lack of community in an asynchronous MOOC style course. Having an assignment where they are directed to research local professionals or national organizations is also an option. As mentioned prior, the use of visual elements in this course has room for growth. Course designers should find ways to integrate diverse visual content throughout the course. This content acts to catch the learner's attention. Additionally, developing multimedia learning objects that are interactive, such as videos with embedded quizzes, can increase student engagement. Finally, addressing the issues with the overall visual design would help to create clarity and prevent overwhelm in learners. While this study was not an exhaustive review of LDT 100X, it did provide some clarity on the quality of the overall content and areas that need improvement in the future. Thank you for taking time to review my presentation. I look forward to your feedback.